Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 31st of March of 2026. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Ukraine. We received lots of very interesting updates. Then we will discuss the situation with the NATO, what is happening here. And in the final part of the video we will discuss the situation in the Persian Gulf. So let's start with Ukraine. During the previous 48 hours, the Ukrainians launched several waves of attacks deep inside of the territory of Russia. One of the waves was moving in the northern direction. The Ukrainians once again were trying to attack the Leningrad region. I would like to remind you that during the previous days, the Ukrainians attacked the city of Ust-Luga and its infrastructure, oil infrastructure. Furthermore, the Ukrainians were attacking the city of Primorsk. But as for the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything that can confirm that the Ukrainians during this wave attack managed to deal damage to this object, which means that most likely the Russians managed to repel this attack. Furthermore, I would like to remind you that just yesterday we discussed that the Ukrainians were attacking in the direction of the city of Rostov-on-Don, and we received lots of videos from the city of Taganrog where we can see the battle, the air defense battle between the Russian air defense forces and the Ukrainian missiles and drones that were heading towards the city where the Russian chief of the general staff is located. So, those were two biggest waves of attacks that the Russians managed to repel. The Ukrainians used hundreds of drones, and we could say somewhere by the middle of the 31st of March of 2026 that the Russians showed more or less big results, good results of their air defense forces. But somewhere at 3 or 4 p.m. of the 31st of March of 2026, we began receiving updates from the territory of the central part of Russia, from the area of the city by the name of Nizhnekamsk. As you can see, we have lots of icons in this area. We have this oil refinery, probably the biggest oil refinery through the entire territory of the Russian Federation, and this object of energy infrastructure, of a critical infrastructure of the Russian Federation, was hit and damaged significantly. So this is probably the first video that was published from this area right after explosions or heat took place. So here we can see a huge smoke over this oil refinery, but from this angle very difficult to understand what exactly happened and what exactly attacked this territory, or it's something like results of accidents on the territory of this refinery. Later we received this picture, the same episode but from another angle. So here we can see once again the same smoke over this object of energy infrastructure, but from this angle we can clearly see fire that was taking place on the territory of this object of energy infrastructure. And then we start receiving hundreds of videos, hundreds of updates on the matter, lots of explosions. People and civilians of the settlement of Nizhnekamsk were making videos from different angles trying to show and to understand what was happening with their oil refinery. So the oil refinery was damaged. Of course, we need to wait for additional day or two before we get satellite pictures to understand what's happened and what kind of damage either the Ukrainians or a third party managed to deal to this object of energy infrastructure. But Russian official sources stated that lots of people were injured as a result of this situation, and there were casualties among civilians. And now we're moving to the most important thing. We're going to talk about Easter ceasefire. I would like to remind you that just yesterday the president of Ukraine proposed an Easter truce right before this situation in Nizhnekamsk happened. This year, believers of the Russian Orthodox Church and the Orthodox Church of Ukraine celebrate the main church holiday on the same day, April 12th, and Zelensky's proposed an Easter truce, but as of the end of the 31st of March of 2026, we received several answers from the Kremlin. So the Russians are saying that the Kremlin did not see a clear initiative in Zelensky's words about the Easter truce. The Ukrainian president must take responsibility and make a decision for Russia to move not toward a truce but toward peace. Later, this decision will have to be made at a higher cost. That was stated by the spokesman of the Kremlin. Furthermore, he stated that it is clear that the Kiev regime desperately needs truth, and any truth, because the dynamics at the front indicates that Russian troops are advancing along the entire front line. That was also emphasized by a spokesperson of the Kremlin, Peskov. Another important thing is that today the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, made a very interesting statement on this matter. He said that Moscow has given Kiev 2 months to withdraw Ukrainian forces from Donbass, otherwise the terms of peace agreement will change, Zelensky stated. So most likely all these statements behind the scenes, behind the doors, were made yesterday on the 30th of March of 2026, and most likely yesterday the Russians issued this ultimatum to Kiev, and most likely this attack in the direction of this Nizhnekamsk oil refinery was something like an answer to the Russians on their ultimatum that they issued a day ago, which means that most likely in 2 months lots of things will change. But furthermore, I would like to remind you that we are entering April of 2026, which means that this is a third month of 3 months mobilization martial law that is currently taking place on the territory of Ukraine, and the current martial law and mobilization will end at the beginning of May of 2026, so basically in a month. And according to the Russian ultimatum expires in the end of May, so which means that somewhere at the beginning of June of 2026 the Russians will change their demands regarding the peaceful settlement of the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. So very interesting what the Russians are going to change. And from the other side, we need to understand that most likely the Russians are planning during the next 2 months to improve their position significantly. Either the Russians are planning to establish complete control over the Donetsk region, or the Russians are planning to improve their position significantly in the Zaporozhye region. We will understand within the next 2 months. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very interesting updates, and the most important are coming from the area of the Sumy region. As we discussed during the previous video, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to improve their position significantly in the area of Mala Takhmachka. This information was reported by the Group of Forces North and by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. Basically, the Russians, according to this report, answered the second defense layer of the city of Sumy, and now the Russians will continue infiltration of the process further in the southern direction with the purpose to establish a huge part of the Sumy forest, which is the biggest forest along the line of combat contact. So this is the territory of a very big Sumy, forest, which is located basically along the border with the Russian Federation. And with a breakthrough in the area of Mala Takhmachka, we see that the Russians managed to enter this biggest Sumy forest from the northwest, and they will try to keep advancing further in the southern direction, because the Russians understand that this Sumy forest can protect Russians from FPV drone attacks and so on, and obviously the Russians would be able to keep advancing further in the southern direction until they get the city of Sumy itself. So this is a very important situation. Furthermore, during the previous day we received another video, this time published from the area of Yunakivka. In this video we could see how Ukrainians were attacking this tree line. So based on this video we have also adjusted the map, and we can see that most likely the Russians began advancing not just in the area of the Sumy forest from the southwest, but also from the southeast, and the Russians are trying to establish complete control first over the settlement of Sadki and over this huge forest around the village itself. Now let's talk about the Kupiansk direction. During the previous 24 hours we received lots of updates. First of all, the Russians during the previous days were attacking the city of Chiguev, probably trying to destroy temporary deployment points of the armed forces of Ukraine and not allow the Ukrainians to redeploy additional forces further in the direction of the city of Kupiansk. If you remember, during the previous days we were talking a lot about the situation in this area. The Russians managed to improve their position significantly to the east of the river Voskol by capturing covering the settlements of Kovsharovka and Novoasinova. Today we received additional changes on the ground in the northwestern parts of the city of Kupiansk, and we see that the map has been adjusted significantly since the 27th of March of 2026. So this is the end of the 28th, this is the end of the 29th of March, this is the end of the 30th, this is the 31st. So we received during the previous 3 days 3 videos that confirm that the Russians are keeping advancing in the northwestern parts of the city of Kupiansk, and it seems that the Russians have launched their final offensive operation in this area with the purpose to establish complete control over the city of Kupiansk and, the most important, over its western part. So this is probably already a 5th or the 6th battle of the city of Kupiansk since the beginning of the special military operation. Now let's move further. As for the city of Konstantinovka, as for the city of Slaviansk, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received many updates, just several videos from the theater of the city of Slaviansk itself. In this video we can see how the Russians were bombing the central part of the settlement with aviation, and the Russians have started bombing the city of Slaviansk significantly, probably several weeks ago, when most likely the Russians realized that the Ukrainians are not going to withdraw their troops from this area, which means that the Russians would be forced to establish control over this part of Donetsk with military means, and then, according to the latest ultimatum, the Russians are going to change their demands. As for the situation on the ground, we have just lots of icons, updates, explosions. The Russians are trying to push the Ukrainian positions, but without changes on the ground. As for the Konstantinovka direction, right before we started making this video, we received a video that confirms additional progress on the ground from the Russian side. We will discuss this video during the next updates, but during the next update, most likely we will adjust the southwestern parts of the city of Konstantinovka significantly in the Russian favor. As for the Dobropolye direction, during the previous 24 hours, we received small changes on the ground. To the south of the settlement of Shevchenka, the Russians improved their positions along the Olympiyskaya Street, and the Russians are keeping advancing further in the northern direction towards the settlements of Shevchenka, Svetla, Vadyansk, and further in the direction of the city of Dobropolye. As of now, the Russians are still very far from the city of Dobropolye, but the Russians are trying to improve their positions, first of all, to the south in the settlement and to the southwest of the settlement. First, the Russians, it seems, are tasked to establish complete control over these territories between the settlements of Novopodgorodny, Yirivskaya, and Novoalexandrovka, and only then the Russians will try to advance further in the northern direction with the purpose to attack the city of Dobropolye at least from several directions. As for the Zaporozhye direction, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special. The only probably interesting thing is the statement that was made by the Group of Forces East. Today the Russians stated that after the fall of the settlement of Lugovskoye, the Russians were keeping advancing in the northern direction towards the villages of Charivna and Gulyai-Polye. If you remember, we discussed the situation yesterday, and today the Group of Forces East confirmed this update. The Russians of the Group of Forces East are trying to attack these two villages of Charivna and Gulyai-Polye from the southwest and from the west, trying to take these villages in pincers. In coming days, most likely the map in this area would be adjusted. As of the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, we have covered most of the updates. Now let's talk about the situation with NATO. It seems that the NATO organization is collapsing, and it seems that after the end of the conflict on the territory of the Middle East, the United States of America will quit this organization. During the previous day, we received lots of very interesting updates about the situation in this area. It's disappointing to see that in a time of need for the United States, we have countries like Spain, a NATO member that we are pledged to defend, denying us the use of their airspace and bragging about it. Another important thing, countries restricting US military flights to Iran war: Switzerland, Spain, Italy, and France. Another important thing, all of those countries that can't get jet fuel because of the Strait of Hormuz, like the United Kingdom, which refused to get involved in the decapitation decapitation of Iran, I have a suggestion for you. Number one, buy from the United States. We have plenty. And number two, build up some delayed courage, go to the street and just take it. You'll have to start learning how to fight for yourself. The United States of America won't be there to help you anymore, just like you weren't there for us. Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done. Get your own oil. President Donald Trump. Another important statement: if NATO is just about us defending Europe if they're attacked, but then denying us basic rights when we need them, that's not a very good arrangement. So as you can see, according to these statements, the United States of America are very disappointed with the European Union. I would like to remind you, and as we discussed just a minute ago, at least 4 states of the European Union and the NATO restricted US military flights due to Iran war. At least 3 states and Switzerland. We are talking about France, we are talking about Spain, and we are talking about Italy. As for France, the President of the United States of America made a very interesting statement. The country of France wouldn't let planes headed to Israel loaded up with military supplies fly over French territory. France has been very unhelpful with respect to the butcher of Iran, who has been successfully eliminated. The United States of America will remember this. So this is France, and they didn't allow the United States of America to use their airspace to bring cargoes and arms on the territory of the Middle East. The first state that did this was the state of Spain. Several days ago, they stated that Spain has closed its airspace to American planes involved in strikes on Iran. According to Defense Minister Margarita Robles, we do not allow the use of military bases or the use of airspace for actions related to the war in Iran, she said to journalists in Madrid. The decision is part of the Spanish government's already adopted decision not to participate in or facilitate a war that was started unilaterally and in violation of international law. Right after Spain, Italy joined to this, let's say, coalition, and they also closed the airspace for the United States of America. Italy, following Spain, has banned U.S. aircraft involved in the conflict with Iran from using its military bases. But these are not the only things that happened with the United States of America and that are happening right now with the NATO organization. Later, we received another very interesting statement made that came from Poland. The US requested their Patriot systems back from Poland, but were refused there as well. Our Patriot batteries and their armaments serve to protect Polish airspace and NATO's eastern flank. That was stated by the Polish defense minister. So we see that something like a strike, something like a protest of the NATO countries and the European countries against the United States of America. The US has asked Poland to send one of its Patriot missile batteries to the Middle East, but Warsaw says no, and this is the beginning of collapse of the NATO organization. We see that the United States of America is hesitating. We see that the United States of America wants to finish, maybe just Donald Trump, but he wants to finish the conflict on the territory of the Middle East, and he needs support of allies, but he doesn't see the support from the European countries. And the thing is that it seems that the European countries and the NATO countries decided to use this situation against the United States of America and to make a very tricky situation. I would like to remind you that at the beginning of the conflict on the territory of the Middle East, the Iranians said that everybody can use the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz and to purchase oil and to export and to import or buy to move oil through this territory, only in case if they don't support the United States of America and Israel. So the United States of America was trying to convince the European countries that the only way how they can get cheap oil and cheap gas from from the territory of the Middle East is to support the United States of America to bring their forces in this region and together to unblock the Strait of Hormuz and to establish complete control over this territory. But now we see that the European countries decided to use another approach. They decided to probably to say that they don't support the Operation Epic Fury that was started by the United States of America, and it seems that the European countries like Spain, France, Switzerland, and Italy believe that this will help them to have access and to be allowed to use the Strait of Hormuz for oil purposes. So, and this is something that doesn't fit the understanding of the President of the United States of America of the current situation. Meanwhile, the parties continue bombing and attacking each other. The sources are saying that everything is ready for the ground operation, but yet this ground operation hasn't started yet. We continue receiving updates that the Iranians were bombing the United Arab Emirates during the previous 24 hours. We continue receiving updates about crisis, about more vessels and tankers destroyed in the area of the Persian Gulf, and it seems that there is no end to this situation. Furthermore, we see that the United Arab Emirates collapses. Today we received a report that the war in Iran has erased $120 billion from United Arab Emirates stock markets in weeks. The country states is moving further and deeper into the economical crisis. And of course, we're not talking about the states of Bahrain and Qatar, which most likely has more problems than the United States or United Arab Emirates or any other state in this region. Another important thing is that the Israelis continue their buffer zone operation in the southern parts of Lebanon. According to information we have, during the previous days, the Israeli defense forces managed to improve their position significantly and to force the pro-Iranian forces further in the northern direction. According to information we have, Israel reached Litani River and continued the expansion of the buffer zone. Several sources stated that the war in the Middle East and the actions of the coalition against Iran will continue until the Israelis finish the buffer zone operation and until they establish complete control over the territory to the south of the river by the name of Litani. As you can see, and according to the current map, they're just at the beginning of this pass, so which means that most likely it will take from 2 to maybe even 8 weeks before the Israelis will be able to establish this buffer zone, and maybe then the United States of America will quit this conflict in the Middle East and will leave the Iranians one-on-one with the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. Furthermore, we received a report that during the previous 24 hours, the coalition attacked the ammo depot in the area of the siege of Isfahan. The US carried out a nighttime strike on a major Iranian ammunition depot in Isfahan using bunker buster bombs weighing about 900 kilos. Powerful secondary explosions were captured on the video, and Trump also shared the footage. So this is the same video but from another angle. Then we have fire anomalies in this area. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, push your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.